Luxury has a sound. It is the soft click of a door that seals too well, the hush of carpet that swallows footsteps, the steady hum of air that never smells like real night. I stand in the middle of the suite in a dress that cost more than my old car, and none of it feels like celebration. It feels like evidence. White flowers, chilled champagne, a bed dressed in silk like a staged photograph. Somewhere below, the city keeps living. Up here, I feel watched by the room itself, as if it is waiting for a verdict. Tonight. Dominic Kane is not the kind of man you forget. He fills space without trying, shoulders squared, movements quiet and economical, like every step is measured against risk. The suit on him looks like armor, not fashion. His eyes sweep the suite the way searchlights sweep water. Not curious, just thorough. I had seen him earlier under chandeliers, surrounded by men who smiled too much. Here, stripped of music and applause, he seems even larger. My skin reads him before my mind does. Heat in my palms, tightness in my throat. Distance becomes my first language again tonight, alone together. I do not say it out loud, but the plea rises anyway, urgent and humiliating. Please do not touch me. The thought arrives with my heartbeat, loud in my ears, sharper than any vow I took today. My body folds inward as if it can hide behind lace. I pull the sleeves down, smooth the skirt, adjust the neckline, pretending I am fixing fabric instead of building a shield. I keep my gaze low, not submissive on purpose, just trained. How many times has a room turned into a trap for me? Why did I think tonight could be different? I count breaths the way other brides count blessings. In for 4, hold, out for 6, keep my shoulders loose, keep my hands visible, keep my feet angled toward the door. I notice every camera in the corner, every lock on the balcony, the line of sight from the bathroom to the bed. I know where the phone is and where the shadows gather. This is not romance. It is readiness. Dominic stops 3 steps away, leaving space between us. Is he being careful? Or is he waiting for me to break? I cannot tell yet. My body keeps shaking. In my head, Lily is tucked into the small hotel room Mrs. Delaney arranged for her, safe with a cartoon playing low and her blanket smelling like home. She does not know the price paid for the flowers downstairs. She only knows I kissed her forehead and promised I would be right back. I carry that promise like fragile glass. If I shatter, she shatters with me. I picture her lunchbox, the one she insists is lucky. I repeat her name silently, like a prayer that steadies my hands. A mother learns to survive for 2, even when I'm scared. The silence stretches until it becomes heavy. I reach for the clasp at my throat, fingers clumsy, because I cannot breathe inside my lace. The fabric slides a fraction, enough to cool my skin, enough to expose what I was hiding. Old marks, faint and layered, like fingerprints pressed into time. Nothing dramatic, just proof my body has been carrying a story I never told. Dominic's gaze drops, locks, and holds. He does not step closer. He stops moving. The air turns sharp, like winter. I feel his focus shift away from a husband's claim and toward an investigator's question. And he moves at last, not toward me, but away from the bed and its staged romance. He sets his jacket on a chair like he is disarming himself. He places his phone on the table and taps it twice, the kind of quiet command that makes the world rearrange. Then he angles his body aside, giving me a clear path to the bathroom and the door, as if escape is allowed. He communicates with motion, not voice. Open palm, slow breath, steady stillness. In another life, a man like him would be my nightmare. Tonight, his restraint feels like mercy. I hate how fast my mind bargains. If he is kind, maybe I can stop bracing. If he is careful, maybe Lily will never learn my rules. But hope is dangerous. It has fooled me before. I watch him, waiting for the switch that always comes. It does not. He studies the marks like a map. Then looks at my face with something colder than anger. Purpose. I understand with a jolt that he is no longer thinking about a marriage contract. He is thinking about a crime. And in his world, crimes demand answers. I feel the past waking. My hands stop shaking, not because I am calm, but because my body notices his distance. He does not cross the space between us. He lets me keep the air I need. I have lived as if silence could protect me, as if hiding could keep Lily safe. In this room, silence has already failed. The marks proved that. Dominic's stillness feels like a line drawn in stone. And the truth hits. This night was never the beginning. The beginning was 3 days ago, behind a polished table, when my father traded me with fine print and called it peace. The real beginning of my marriage wasn't the suite with its white roses. It was 3 days earlier, in a downtown office that smelled like stale coffee and expensive wood polish. A mahogany table cut the room in half like a borderline. Men in dark suits spoke in calm, clipped phrases about docks, routes, and stability, as if the river itself needed permission to flow. I sat one chair behind my father, hands folded, spine straight, face neutral. I was not invited as a person. I was present as proof. Silence between their sentences felt heavier than a gun. My father, Harold Hart, had traveled from the East Coast with a folder of numbers and favors. He called it peace, the kind that keeps trucks moving and judges friendly. Dominic Kane sat across from him, still as a locked door, listening more than he spoke, and I felt his attention land on details. Who interrupted, who avoided eye contact, who smiled too early. St. Louis was his territory, the riverport pipelines and warehouses that made money look legitimate. My father needed a bridge into that power. I was the bridge, with fine print. A child. Lily's name stayed unsaid aloud. They never asked what I wanted, because wanting wasn't part of the contract. My sister Sienna was the golden daughter, the one photographed at charity galas, the one my father introduced like a crown. She couldn't be offered, not when she was already promised to Gavin Blackwell, the New York heir everyone praised for his manners. That engagement was treated like sacred law. I was the spare part. I was available. Worse, I was complicated. Every time someone mentioned my daughter, the room tightened, act as if Lily were a stain on the deal's elegance. They wanted Lily invisible, me obedient. I learned long ago that perfection is camouflage. I kept my nails neat, my voice soft, my expression pleasant, because ugly emotions invite punishment. In that boardroom, I performed the same way. A polite daughter, a calm woman, a problem that didn't complain. Inside, my mind ran 2 tracks. One track watched my father's mouth shape promises he didn't have to keep. The other track pictured Lily's small shoulders under her backpack, walking into school, trusting I would come home. Mothers measured danger in seconds, not speeches. I counted exits, and I counted lies, and wondered which lie would win. Dominic didn't look at me the way men at my father's parties used to look. There was no sticky curiosity, no hungry entitlement. He studied me like a ledger line that didn't balance. His stillness made other men talk too much. A lawyer cleared his throat. A captain from the docks laughed at the wrong moment. Dominic watched all of it, and I could almost see him filing away weaknesses. When his eyes returned to me, they paused on my hands, my posture, the careful distance I kept from everyone. Was he seeing fear or training, or both in me? Later that afternoon there was a planning dinner, a rehearsal of smiles before the ceremony, crystal glasses, linen napkins, a skyline view that made the city look harmless. Sienna floated through it like she belonged to the light, and Gavin stayed close to her. Perfect suit, perfect grin. The moment I felt his presence, my body reacted first. My stomach hollowed, my shoulders locked. I tasted metal, like I had bitten my tongue. I kept my face smooth anyway, because I knew what happened when I didn't. Dominic's gaze cut to me, sharp, then flicked to Gavin and stayed longer. The decision landed with a pen, not a kiss. Papers were slid across the table, and my father's hand hovered over the signature line like a judge's gavel. Dominic's approval came with a nod that felt final, as if a bridge had been built and I was walking across it. My father explained the details I was supposed to follow: where I would live, when I would travel, how appearances would look. Lily was discussed like a schedule problem, something to manage quietly. I understood the message. My motherhood made me vulnerable, and vulnerability was leverage for them, not love. By the time the wedding day arrived, the deal had already hardened into reality. I smiled because cameras require it, because my father's guests measure obedience the way they measure champagne. I kept my shoulders relaxed and my steps steady, even when my lungs forgot how to fill. Dominic stood beside me like a shadow with a pulse. Not warm, not cruel, simply present. He didn't touch me unless tradition demanded it, and when he did, it was brief, careful, almost clinical. I watched the crowd the way I watched weather, waiting for the storm Gavin to move close again. After the last flash of cameras, Dominic's car carried me away from the ballroom and into quiet. City lights slid across the window like water, and I felt myself shrinking into the habits that had kept me alive. Don't need, don't ask, don't feel. When the gates of his home opened, I saw iron and silence built to last. I promised myself I would be flawless, invisible, grateful, know whatever the role required, as long as Lily stayed safe. Dominic walked ahead, never rushing me, but never letting me forget he noticed everything. I followed, rehearsing how to disappear quietly always. Dominic's gates opened without a sound, and the mansion rose behind them like a calm, expensive warning. The moment I stepped inside, I wrote my rules across my own ribs. Don't ask, don't need, don't feel. Those 3 sentences had kept me alive in rooms where love was just another mask. Marble floors, soft lighting, art that looked chosen by someone who hated clutter. Everything designed to make a person behave. I kept my bouquet until my fingers cramped, because holding something gave my hands a job. Dominic walked ahead, not rushing me, not guiding me by the elbow either, simply moving like he owned time. I watched his back and measured the space between us, the way I used to measure the distance to a door. I promised myself I would become quiet enough to survive. Even my smile felt rented, but I wore it because rented things matter. The house had layers the way a river has currents. Cameras tucked into corners like small dark eyes. Gates inside gates. A keypad on every quiet door. Footsteps muffled by rugs so thick they could hide secrets. Men in suits drifted through hallways, not servants, not guests, just part of the architecture. They nodded to Dominic and glanced past me, as if I were a detail already approved. I learned the rhythm fast. Breakfast appeared before anyone asked. Coffee smelled strong and clean, never burned. A schedule lived on tablets and in the tight posture of security. I kept my voice low, answered with yes, no, or whatever he prefers, because preferences were safer than opinions. When Dominic passed, I made myself smaller without moving, the way you do when a storm walks through your kitchen. I told myself it was temporary, yet my body believed every rule was forever. Days blurred into a careful routine. I arranged lilies in vases because flowers looked like happiness from a distance. I thanked staff members before they could apologize, and I never raised my voice, even when a dish arrived too salty or a drawer stuck. My anger stayed folded away like a letter I was afraid to open. Dominic ate most meals alone in his study. When he invited me to the table, I sat with straight shoulders and kept my hands in my lap until he began. If our fingers brushed passing a plate, I pulled back as if heat had flared under my skin. I hated that reflex. I hated how automatic it was, but I could not outthink it. Dominic noticed everything. He never commented, yet his eyes tracked my smallest flinch like he was reading a code. I wondered what would happen if I asked for kindness, once. Lily arrived 2 mornings after the wedding, escorted by Mrs. Delaney and a driver who carried her pink backpack like it was fragile. The instant I saw my daughter's hair still messy from sleep, my lungs remembered how to fill. Lily ran to me, but I caught myself before I reached first. The habit of waiting for permission lived deep. I let her choose the distance. Then she chose none at all, and my heart cracked open. I walked her through the mansion like it was a museum that could bite. I showed her which doors were for staff, which hallways were quiet, where the sun hit the rug in the afternoon. I packed her lunch with cut strawberries and a note shaped like a star. Motherhood was the one place I didn't feel rented. It was mine. When Lily laughed, the sound softened the cameras, at least inside me. Mrs. Delaney worked with a quiet kindness that didn't ask for repayment. One afternoon, she showed Lily how to fold napkins into little boats, and I found myself smiling for real, remembering my own mother teaching me the same trick at our chipped kitchen table. The memory slipped out of me like a sigh, warm and almost careless. I even laughed, a soft sound I forgot I still had. Then the hallway changed. Footsteps, measured and familiar, and my body snapped back into its smaller shape. Dominic entered the kitchen and the warmth evaporated. My shoulders tightened. My smile turned polite. I heard my voice flatten into safe tones without choosing it. Dominic paused, taking in the shift the way he took in weather reports. His gaze moved from Lily's paper boat to my hands, and I felt exposed in a new way. Not accused, not loved, just seen fully. Night in the mansion was the hardest part. Security lights painted thin bars across the curtains, and every whisper of air through the vents sounded like a warning. Lily slept curled around her stuffed rabbit. Safe in the guest room, Mrs. Delaney made cheerful. I sat beside her bed in the dark, listening to her breathing until my own slowed. When I returned to my room, the bed felt too big and too staged, like the suite downtown all over again. Dominic stayed on the far side, a silhouette of control, leaving space I didn't know how to trust. My body refused sleep. I jolted at tiny sounds. My lungs forgot their rhythm. At some point, I drifted and woke with my heart racing, throat sore, like I fought in sleep. In the morning, Dominic watched me longer, and I knew the next night would not stay quiet for long. Night in Dominic's mansion has its own pressure, like the house is holding its breath. Lily sleeps in the next room, her rabbit tucked under her chin, the nightlight painting soft stars on the wall. I lie rigid, listening to vents, gates, footsteps, and wondering when my body will rest. I tell myself I am safe, that locks and cameras mean something, that Dominic's restraint means I can unclench. My mind answers with old rules and old punishments. I swallow anger until it burns my throat. Then I finally drift into a thin sleep that feels borrowed from someone else. In the dream, the air is thick and sweet, the way it was in my father's house during parties, when laughter covered knives. A door clicks shut. My skin knows the sound. I try to speak, but my mouth is cotton and shame. I feel hands in the dark again. I wake fighting, not thinking, arms jerking as if I can push the room away. Sheets twist around my legs. My heart bangs so hard it hurts. For one terrible second, I do not know where Lily is, or where I am. I gasp, and the ceiling swims above me. Movement on the far side of the bed makes me flinch. Dominic is upright, a dark shape against the dim lamp. He does not rush me. He stops short, hands open, posture low, like he is approaching an injured animal that might bolt. My chest tightens, to bite or run. The room narrows to corners and shadows. I curl inward, protecting my throat, my ribs, my secrets. Breath catches in sharp bursts. I hear a sound that might be my own voice, thin and broken, and I hate it for existing. Shame follows panic like a second wave over me. Dominic steps back another pace, giving me room to choose distance. He goes to the bathroom, returns with a small towel soaked in cold water. He holds it where I can see, waiting. I nod without meaning to. The cold touch on my forehead shocks my body into the present. He stays near but not too near, a steady silhouette I can anchor to. I match his rhythm by watching his shoulders rise and fall. My lungs remember how to work. Minutes pass in quiet. When I blink tears away, my hands stop shaking and I unclench from my wrists. In the struggle, my nightshirt has shifted. Fabric slid off my shoulder, and lamplight finds what I hide. Faded marks, newer ones, like a pattern that tells a story without words. I follow Dominic's gaze and feel my stomach drop. It is like caught in a lie I did not tell. Dominic's face does not twist into pity. It goes blank, then sharp. His jaw sets with a kind of precision that scares me more than shouting. He looks at the door, at the phone, at the hallway beyond, as if mapping threats. He returns his attention to me, choosing control. My first instinct is to erase the evidence. I pull the fabric up, cover my shoulder, smile like a hostess. My mind offers an accident, anything ordinary. The excuse almost forms. Then I see Dominic's stillness and realize he will not accept it. My throat tightens with anger at myself. I cannot keep lying because the lie would cost Lily. That truth has always been the chain. The person who did this made sure I understood he could reach my child. He needed certainty. A picture from a sidewalk. A mention of her color. Proof my silence belonged to him. Dominic does not crowd me when my confession spills out in fragments. He keeps his distance, but his attention is absolute. I see his eyes flick toward the hallway where Lily sleeps, then back to my face, as if he is promising protection with a glance. Hope appears, unwanted, still. Dominic turns toward the hallway, listening for Lily. He moves with careful quiet, checks the door, then returns. His attention is colder now, focused. He taps his phone twice, like setting pieces on a board. Then he watches me, waiting for what I cannot say without breaking me or pushing. I try to slide back into the role of polite wife, but my body refuses. My skin feels too thin. Anger simmers, aimed at my father and at the man who taught me fear. Shame follows. Insisting survival was a sin. Tears press at my eyes, but I swallow them. Lily's face flashes in my mind, the way she trusts me to be bigger than the dark. Every threat I endured was shaped around that trust. If I spoke, I believed she would pay. That belief built my silence. Even now, my body waits for punishment, trained to expect it. Dominic stays silent, but this silence is not a weapon. It is space. He does not demand details or touch without warning. He watches my breathing, sets the cold towel aside, and sits where I can see him. His presence feels unreal, like kindness. It makes me afraid and grateful. I stare at the carpet and feel the mansion listening. A camera blinks. Lily turns in her sleep. I want to tell Dominic, but my tongue is weighed with consequences. Truth feels like a pin. If I release it, war follows. My chest tightens around name I swallowed for years. My mouth dries as the room waits. I know what happens when names are spoken in my father's world. They become wars. Dominic's stillness says he will pay that cost. I am shaking, thinking of Lily. The truth crowds my tongue. One name sits there, poisonous, ready to be released. After the nightmare, my body felt scraped raw, like I had been running for miles without moving. The first thing I did was listen for Lily. Her small breathing stayed steady through the wall. Dominic sat where I could see him, still, waiting for my truth without rushing, crowding me. The name lodged in my throat for years finally surfaced, heavy and poisonous. It was Gavin Blackwell, my sister Sienna's fiancé. Saying it inside my head felt like stepping on broken glass. I watched Dominic's eyes sharpen, not with surprise, but with immediate understanding, as if he had suspected already. Everything rearranged the second I named him. Weddings, handshakes, family photos, all turned into a trap I had walked into on purpose. I felt my father's deal hovering over the room like smoke. If Gavin fell, so would old promises, and people would retaliate. That thought made my stomach twist. It started as something my father called training, the way you train a dog to sit before you feed it. I was 21, newly alone, newly a mother, and desperate to keep a roof over us. Harold invited Gavin into our orbit and acted like it was normal enough. Gavin never needed to shout. He used doors that locked, schedules that cornered me, and the certainty that nobody would believe the inconvenient daughter. He spoke in compliments that felt like handcuffs, then in warnings that sounded polite. My body learned to obey before my mind did every single time. The worst part was my father's face when I hinted at fear. He did not ask why. He corrected my posture, my tone, my gratitude. He wanted me polished, quiet, useful. Gavin's access became one more unspoken rule in the house, like where to place forks and how to smile. Then Lily became the leash. Gavin learned her preschool name, her teacher, her favorite cartoon, the color of her rain boots. He never said he would hurt her, not directly. He simply proved he could reach her world whenever he wanted, and let my imagination do the rest at night. I hated myself for staying. I hated myself for not fighting louder, for taking the safest exit each time. But mothers do math with fear, and my math always ended with Lily alive. Shame kept me silent, yet anger simmered under it, waiting for oxygen. Dominic's quiet presence gave it. As I spoke, I watched for punishment the way you watch for lightning. It never came. Dominic did not demand proof. He did not ask what I wore or why I returned. He listened like my words were enough to move the earth, and that realization shook me to pieces. He moved without drama. A quiet call, a coded message, and the mansion shifted. I heard doors lock in a new sequence, footsteps multiply in the hallway, and a check at Lily's room that did not wake her. Dominic returned with the same distance, but his focus had turned lethal. Before dawn, Dominic's second arrived. Miles Rourke had the eyes of someone who solved problems for a living. He listened in the doorway, then took notes without asking me to repeat myself. I saw him glance toward Lily's room, and I understood my daughter was now part of their plan. Miles worked fast, and the information he returned with made my skin go cold. Gavin had more shadows than I knew. There were payments that vanished into charities, complaints that dissolved before reaching desks, women who moved away suddenly and never spoke again. It was a pattern, not a mistake. Anger finally found its voice inside me, not loud, but steady. I pictured my father signing papers while I swallowed fear. I pictured him praising Sienna's engagement while I learned silence. Harold did not need to touch me to be guilty. He simply handed me over and called it duty. Dominic's world was built on crime, but I saw the line he refused to blur. Predators were not business. Threats against children were not leverage. When his eyes flicked toward Lily, something hardened in his face. He was planning removal, not negotiation, and it terrified me as it relieved me. What stunned me most was how quickly he treated my word like evidence. I had spent years being doubted and coached into smiling. Dominic did none of that. He watched my breathing, the curl of my shoulders, and he believed me. That belief felt like stepping on ice, safe somehow. But belief was only the beginning. Gavin had friends, money, and my father's reach. A private confrontation would disappear. Dominic knew it. I saw it when he paced, stopped, then started calling allies in a careful order. He was building a stage where silence could not survive no matter cost. The thought of being seen in public terrified me more than any locked door. I pictured men choosing comfort over truth. I pictured my father's stare, Sienna's confusion, Gavin's smile. Dominic did not debate it. He prepared as if my voice mattered, and that meant the truth would be heard. By morning, the mansion felt different, not softer, but sharper. Plans moved like chess pieces. Miles gathered files. Dominic watched me with steady patience. I understood what came next, a meeting and a choice. I would walk in and let my story exist where it could not be erased anymore. I checked Lily's door one more time, letting her steady breathing calm my hands. Then I faced Dominic and Miles, watching a war form from my truth. The underworld would choose. Either they stood with us, or they protected a predator. I did not know which outcome scared me more. The loft sat above a closed jewelry store in Midtown, the kind of place you'd never look at twice. Inside, it smelled like coffee that had been reheated and leather that had never seen sunlight. 2 armed men checked us at the door. Then another set of eyes watched from a mezzanine. The music from the street was faint, but the silence under it was thick, pressing on my ears. I walked beside Dominic, hands clasped, shoulders tight, trying not to disappear into my own skin. Miles was already there, placing folders in neat stacks, and the screens on the far wall glowed dark, waiting for a story nobody wanted to hear. Men filled the room in small clusters, suits and quiet power, each one surrounded by the invisible radius of his security. They didn't greet me. They measured me. I felt it in the way their eyes skimmed my hands, my throat, my wedding ring. A woman like me was supposed to be decor. The soft proof an alliance had been signed. Dominic didn't let me drift to the edge. He kept me at his side, not possessive, just deliberate, as if my presence was part of the evidence. I wondered how many of them already knew. Miles started without ceremony. He clicked a remote and a timeline appeared on the screens, dates marching across months like footsteps. Along the bottom were bank transfers and shell companies, names that meant nothing until you saw how often they repeated. Above the line were photos blurred at the edges, locations, hotel logos, a pattern of movement that made my stomach tighten. I watched the room react in microseconds. A jaw locking, a hand curling around a glass, a man leaning back as if distance could disinfect him. Nobody asked where the information came from. My name was only one dot on that line, but I could feel it burning. Miles laid out the sequence in calm blocks. Reports that were filed and then vanished, complaints withdrawn, people paid to forget. He didn't describe suffering. He showed the infrastructure that made it possible. I remembered Gavin's smile at my father's parties and realized smiles were just uniforms. In the corner of the screen, a list of women's first names flickered, each one connected to a hush payment, each one a door that had closed quietly. Then came the money. Miles opened a folder and spread printouts across the table, not for me, but so the men could touch their disbelief. St. Louis to Jersey, Jersey to Miami, Miami to nowhere, on loops that looked like normal business until you understood they were smoke. Dominic stood behind him, silent, letting the paper speak. I noticed how he never looked at the men who were uncomfortable. He watched the ones who were calculating, the ones who might choose profit over principle. The room felt smaller with every page turned. Miles changed the slide again, and this time it wasn't numbers. It was a school map, A simple route traced in red marker. A reminder that threats don't have to be shouted to be real. My throat closed. I saw Lily's sneakers by the mansion door in my mind. Her crooked ponytail. The way she waves without looking back. Someone in the room exhaled hard, like he'd swallowed something bitter. That was the moral line Dominic had dragged into the light. Children were not bargaining chips. Not in any world. I expected arguments, denial, the usual performance of power. Instead, I watched men do what I'd never been allowed to do. Sit with discomfort. Some avoided the screens entirely, staring at their own hands. Others leaned forward, eyes narrowing, as if searching for a loophole that would let them keep old alliances clean. Dominic's stillness held the room. He wasn't asking for opinions. He was forcing a choice. My shame rose, hot and familiar. Yet underneath it I felt something new, the ground of belief forming. I could almost stand taller. When the moment came, it was almost quiet. No formal vote, no raised hands. The decision happened in bodies. One man pushed back his chair and stood, face tight, eyes on Dominic. Another followed, then another, until a small line of men were upright, choosing a side without saying a word. The ones who stayed seated looked heavier, anchored by caution or greed. I felt the room split like a fault line beneath my feet. For the first time, I understood my story had weight. It could start a war, and it could also end one. Dominic didn't celebrate. He simply nodded once, a small movement that felt like a door locking. Miles gathered the folders, already sorting the next steps. I realized retaliation would come fast, because men like Gavin never accept exposure quietly. My mind jumped to Lily again, to her fragile normal life and how quickly it could be shattered by someone angry. Walking out of that loft, I felt smaller and stronger at the same time, like a new bone had formed under old bruises. Back at the mansion, I watched security double like shadows at dusk. Dominic moved with calm urgency, and I understood the cost of being believed. I could not protect Lily with politeness anymore. That night, while she slept with her rabbit, I made a decision that scared me more than war. I would learn to fight. After the vote, the mansion didn't feel safer. It felt alert, like a dog that had finally caught the scent of the hunter. The gates still whispered shut. The cameras still blinked. The staff still spoke in soft voices. But the air had a tight edge now, the kind you taste right before a storm. I kept replaying the loft in my head. Chairs scraping, men standing, men staying seated, the room splitting into truth and convenience. I had walked in ashamed and small. I walked out believed, and that was a miracle I didn't know how to carry. Belief came with a price. Every time a car slowed near the property line, my shoulders climbed toward my ears. Every time Lily asked an innocent question, my mind heard the answer Gavin used to threaten without words. I felt the old instinct begging me to vanish again, to keep my head down and hope the world forgot I existed. But Lily never forgot me. She watched my face like children watch weather, waiting to see if the sky would break. I couldn't teach her that survival meant shrinking. So I made a different choice, one that terrified me more than silence. I asked to learn, not to become violent, not to turn into Dominic. I asked because I was done being easy to corner. I asked because I was tired of my body reacting like a trapped animal. I asked because I wanted Lily to grow up remembering her mother as present, not as a ghost hovering at the edge of every room. The request came out of me like a confession, shaky but real. Dominic didn't answer with promises. He answered with systems. The next morning, a simple schedule appeared beside my coffee mug, clipped and clean. A spare room was cleared, the kind of empty space rich people keep for nothing, and it became a place where I could move without being watched by chandeliers. New locks were checked on Lily's windows, and the guard rotation changed in a way even I could feel. Dominic also made rules without saying them. He never stood between me and a doorway. He never reached for my wrist. If I stepped back, he stepped back first, like he was giving my nervous system permission to stay in the present. He treated my boundaries like law, not like a challenge. Training was not glamorous. It was the slow work of making fear less loud. It was learning to breathe on purpose when my chest wanted to clamp shut. It was practicing calm in small moments so my body could find it in big ones. Dominic taught me to notice the shape of a room, the locations of exits, the distance between me and the nearest help, and to move with intention instead of apology. We focused on awareness, on creating space, on leaving early rather than fighting late. Anything that looked like force was framed as a last resort, a line you don't cross unless you have no other choice. The hardest part wasn't moving. It was believing I deserved to. Lily made the whole thing human. She turned my new routines into a game. At breakfast, she lined up blueberries like tiny planets and gave each one a job, then dared me to use a serious voice like a real captain. I tried, failed, and her laugh burst out so bright it made the cameras feel stupid. Later, she did homework at the island while I practiced stillness and counted breaths. Every so often, she glanced up, checked my face, and went back to spelling with a little more confidence, like my calm was something she could borrow. Once she slid her rabbit into my lap without a word. I held it and remembered safety isn't only steel and code. It is a body that can relax. Dominic's respect did something dangerous to my heart. He never acted like my progress belonged to him, and he never treated me like a trophy he'd bought. When he corrected me, he did it with distance, with patience, and with the steady assumption that my no mattered. There were moments I caught him watching me the way he watched maps, measuring not my obedience, but my strength returning. It made me wonder what it would feel like to trust a man who could destroy cities and still choose gentleness in my kitchen. Then the mansion started whispering. It began with a door sensor that chimed a beat late. A small glitch, easy to ignore, unless you've spent years listening for danger to change its rhythm. The next day, a camera feed froze for a blink and resumed, like the house had coughed. Dominic noticed without reacting outwardly. I saw it in the way his attention narrowed and the guard rotation shifted again. A man I didn't recognize smiled at Lily in the hallway. Too friendly, too casual, like he wanted her to remember him. My stomach went cold. Within an hour, he was gone from our floor, reassigned without explanation. By the end of the week, the city felt closer. Miles came and went with folders and darker eyes. One evening I found Dominic at the window, phone in hand, staring at the river lights like they were a warning. When he turned, the air carried that pre-thunder pressure again. I understood without words. Gavin had moved pieces onto the board. He was in the city, or close enough to make our walls feel thin. The house looked calm, but danger was threading itself through the cracks, proving locked doors can still be opened. I felt it in my bones and didn't sleep tonight. Morning came with pancakes and the illusion that storms only belonged outside. Lily sat on the tall kitchen stool in her unicorn pajamas, swinging her legs and humming through a mouthful of strawberries. I packed her lunchbox with a peanut butter sandwich cut into triangles and slipped in a note shaped like a heart, on the kind of small ritual that tells a child tomorrow is promised. Around us, the mansion kept its usual quiet discipline. The soft click of locks, the muted shuffle of security in the hall, the camera lenses blinking like patient eyes. I had started to recognize the patterns the way you recognize a song. Who walked past the kitchen at this hour? Which guard relieved, how long the front gate stayed open for deliveries. It should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like a beautiful cage polished every day. I smiled for Lily, washed dishes, breathed through my training, and told myself that if I could keep my hands steady, my daughter would keep believing in safe. Dominic had already left for meetings, but his presence still ruled the house, a silent promise and a warning today. Then the rhythm stuttered. The back door sensor chimed a beat late, as if someone had pressed a finger on the sound and released it after deciding it was safe. A camera above the pantry pointed slightly lower than it had yesterday, catching more floor and less hallway. When I mentioned it to myself, my mind tried to laugh it off, but my stomach didn't. Mrs. Delaney passed by with fresh towels and gave me the kind of look that asked if I'd slept, if I was okay, without forcing me to answer. I nodded too quickly. Later, footsteps moved down the corridor at the wrong time. Lighter steps, not the heavy guard rotation I'd learned. I paused at the kitchen sink, hands in suds, listening. The house fell back into its curated quiet. Too perfect, like someone had smoothed a blanket over a mess. Lily chattered about a spelling test, and I answered with the right smile. But my eyes kept sliding to the corners where cameras lived. I couldn't tell if I was paranoid, or if paranoia had finally become accurate. Even the air felt edited, as if monitored. I walked Lily to her room for shoes, and that's when dizziness hit, sudden and wrong, like the floor had tipped without moving. My vision narrowed at the edges, and my tongue tasted faintly sweet, the way it does when fear floods your mouth. I tried to steady myself against the doorframe, breathing the way Dominic taught, but the hallway stretched and blurred. There was a blank spot, a missing film reel, and then I was sitting on the bottom stair with my heart racing as if I'd run. Lily's tiny sneaker lay beside me, heel crushed, and my hand was gripping her lunchbox strap so hard my knuckles ached. I couldn't remember picking it up. I couldn't remember how I got there. A noise like a distant chime drifted through the house, then cut off. I forced myself upright and called for Lily in my head, not with my voice, because panic had stolen it. The next thing I knew, the lights changed, the air smelled like engine oil, and the mansion was gone. I surfaced in darkness, confusion pulling me down, my thoughts snapping toward my daughter first. Time became slippery. Later I would piece together what happened back at the house from fragments. Dominic finding Lily safe in Mrs. Delaney's arms, security flooding corridors, alarms showing nothing, as if I had evaporated. Lily's nightlight still glowed, and her rabbit sat on the bed, untouched. Proof Dominic's contingencies had held. That detail is the only reason my mind didn't break completely. The system said no doors opened, and no windows tripped, no vehicles crossed the gate. Miles's voice, imagined through Dominic's posture, must have named the truth. Someone inside could mute a sensor, tilt a camera, smooth the house into silence. I felt Dominic's panic in my ribs, even from far away. A storm without thunder, lethal and controlled. Whoever took me didn't want me for me. They wanted Dominic unbalanced, reckless, choosing rage over strategy. I understood the moment my stomach rolled and I tasted fear again. I was bait, and the hook was the man who believed me. Somewhere, a phone would ring with a fake tip, a warehouse address, all designed to pull him out of his careful mind. I refused to be a helpless prize. When I finally surfaced for real, cold air bit my skin and the world smelled like rust and damp concrete. I lay on a hard floor with my cheek pressed against dust, listening to distant traffic and the drip of water somewhere in the dark. A single bulb hung from a chain, swinging slightly, turning the room into a slow strobe. Warehouse. I sat up too fast and nausea rolled through me, but I forced my eyes open, forced my breath long and steady. Panic wanted to sprint. I made it walk. I checked my body for injuries with shaking hands, then anchored my focus on what Dominic had drilled into me. Space, exits, shadows, the things that can be used and the things that can be avoided. I heard voices outside the door, muffled, confident, and I pictured Gavin's smile. Rage rose, hot and clean, and I held it like fuel instead of fire. Lily was safe. That thought was a rope I gripped with both hands. I stood, quiet, and decided that whatever waited on the other side of this door would meet a different version of me. The bulb swayed above me, turning dust into slow snow. I planted my feet on concrete and forced air into my lungs. In, hold, out. My palms were damp, but my mind stayed sharp. Metal, shadows, one door, two windows, no easy exits. I listened for Lily, heard heartbeat. A rattling truck passed outside, and the warehouse answered with a faint vibration. The air smelled of oil and cold rain, nothing like Dominic's clean rooms. I checked my pockets, found nothing useful, then checked the floor for hazards. Each second I stayed calm was a victory. Still, I breathed. Footsteps approached, measured and confident, and my spine remembered a different hallway. The door opened and light widened. Gavin stepped in as if he owned the air, unsuit immaculate, expression smooth. He expected my eyes to drop. I lifted my chin instead, refusing that old reflex. Fear stayed but quiet. He circled me slowly, the same predator patience I knew too well, and my stomach tried to fold inward. I pictured Lily at the mansion, protected by locked layers and people who took Dominic seriously. Relief flickered, sharp enough to hurt. Lily was not here. Lily was out of reach. Gavin's confidence was a costume, but it was stitched from years of getting away with things. He wanted me trembling, begging, grateful for scraps of mercy. I felt the urge to freeze, then chose movement instead. I stepped sideways, keeping distance, making him follow my angle. Bulbs swung between us. Behind him, two men lingered near crates, watching like they expected a show. I used the noise, the drip, the hum, the swing of light to break the rhythm Gavin tried to set. When he moved closer, I moved first. When he reached, I slipped away, staying on my feet. A chair scraped when my hip bumped it, and the sound startled one of the guards. That split second mattered. I grabbed the chair back, not to attack, but to create space, to keep hands off my body. Gavin's smile faltered. He was used to my surrender, not my choices. He tried to corner me, and my breath spiked, but I forced it down. I watched his feet, his shoulders, the way confidence makes men lazy. I feinted one direction, then slipped the other. A crate edge caught his knee, and he stumbled. I did not gloat. I moved forward. The room tightened, as if everyone realized the script had changed. Gavin's eyes sharpened, searching for the old buttons to press, the old shame to trigger. I pictured Lily's lunchbox on the counter, my note inside, and I steadied. Not tonight, not for him, ever. Somewhere beyond the walls I imagined Dominic driving hard, fighting his instincts. I understood the trap now. Gavin wanted Dominic to burst in with rage, to make mistakes, to spill blood that could justify revenge. I refused to be the bait that ruined him. I refused to become the excuse. Gavin lunged again, desperate to reset control, and one of his men shifted like he might join. I snapped my gaze at the man, and he paused, uncertain. That pause bought time. I slid behind a steel table, using it as barrier, keeping my hands free and my voice silent. The warehouse door crashed open and sound rushed in. Dominic entered first, eyes scanning, weapon low, moving like a storm with rules. He expected to find me on the floor. He found me upright behind a table, breathing hard, refusing to fold. His stare flickered, shock turning to proud disbelief. Gavin saw Dominic and tried to reclaim control, shifting so I became a shield again. Rage flared, but Dominic did not rush. He angled himself, protecting me without touching. His men secured the exits. Gavin's confidence cracked, and for the first time I saw fear on him. It felt deserved. I hovered at the edge of vengeance, craving an end. My hands shook. Dominic stepped nearer, not to claim me, but to steady me. He kept his palm open, body angled to give space. In that restraint, I understood he was protecting my future self. I exhaled and chose mercy. Dominic's men closed in and Gavin's options shrank. Miles would need this place intact, so I stayed careful where I stepped. Gavin fought the idea of consequences, but he was outnumbered and restrained. Dominic signaled for cuffs without a word, as if law had entered the underworld. At last, truly, Dominic moved between Gavin and me without grabbing, letting my body accept safety at its own speed. My knees wobbled as adrenaline drained. I noticed dirt on my sleeve and let out a laugh, not joy, disbelief. Dominic's gaze held mine, steady. For the first time, I shook without shame. Sirens never came, because this was not public theater yet. Dominic's men photographed the room and marked corners like accountants. Miles arrived, face tight, speaking to contacts beyond our world. Watching them, I understood the plan. Justice would be surgical, not loud. Gavin would not vanish. He would be exposed. As Gavin was dragged out, he tried to trap me with his stare. I met it. Fear lived in me, but it no longer drove. Dominic waited for my nod, touching my shoulder, then guided me toward the door. Cold air hit my face, and I remembered how to breathe. Back inside, the warehouse looked less like a nightmare, and more like a receipt. My body began to crash, shaking now that danger passed. I pictured Lily asleep under her nightlight and promised to return whole. The warehouse was only the battle. Next would come raids, arrests, and alliances collapsing. Back at the mansion, I shook so hard I could barely turn the key in Lily's door. She was asleep on her side, hair fanned across the pillow, backpack propped by the nightstand like tomorrow still existed. Seeing that ordinary detail broke something open in me. My lungs finally released the breath I had been holding since the warehouse bulb swung over my head. I sat on the floor and let my hands tremble until they slowed. By the next morning, the house moved like a machine resetting after impact. Security doubled at every gate. Miles brought coffee and files that smelled of toner and rain. Dominic didn't sleep. I saw it in the way his jaw stayed tight, and his phone never left his hand. No one raised their voice. Panic lived in the angles of bodies, in the sudden quiet when a message arrived. I understood we were past hiding. Evidence had been preserved too carefully to vanish. A few days later, the consequences started landing like dominoes. Gavin lost his shield first. Men who once laughed at his jokes suddenly looked away when his name surfaced in meetings. Old favors stopped working. Friends stopped answering. In Dominic's circles, he's someone who targets the innocent, becomes a liability nobody wants to carry. I didn't need details to feel the shift. It was in the way cars no longer followed us at a distance, as if the city itself had exhaled. My father tried to rewrite the story before it hardened. He sent calls, requested meetings, circulated polite explanations that framed everything as misunderstandings and rival propaganda. I had grown up watching him do it, the way he could turn cruelty into rumor and rumor into silence. This time, the silence refused to cooperate. Public whispers became louder than his private threats. Allies who once owed him money realized they owed Dominic fear more. Even in our world, reputation breaks when proof stacks high enough. Sienna arrived at the mansion with eyes that looked older than her years. I watched her hands shake as she set down her engagement ring like it was contaminated. She didn't scream or collapse. She went quiet, the way people do when the floor shifts under them. Grief and betrayal moved across her face in slow waves. I wanted to hate her for being loved so easily, but what I felt was something sadder. A sister realizing she had been standing beside a monster and never saw the teeth. She left that day without Gavin's name on her tongue again. The inside breach was the last wound to close. Miles traced the camera tilt and sensor delay to one access log, then another, then a pattern that kept pointing to Ethan Vale, a security lead Dominic had trusted for years. Hearing it made me nauseous. like the house itself had betrayed Lily and me. Ethan was removed without drama. Badge deactivated, keys collected, a silent escort out of the gates. No blood, no spectacle, just the cold efficiency of trust being revoked. I still checked Lily's windows twice that night. After that, Dominic shifted from war to shelter. He brought in a trauma therapist with a locked office off the library. He didn't ask what we talked about. He simply rearranged his life around my appointments, like healing was a meeting that mattered. He ordered fresh paint for Lily's room and replaced the heavy security lights outside her window with softer ones. The fortress stayed, but it learned to breathe. I expected revenge to taste sweet. What I felt instead was relief so deep it was almost quiet joy. When Dominic told me Gavin would face charges that couldn't be bargained away, I didn't celebrate. I sat beside Lily at the kitchen island while she colored a sun on scrap paper and realized I could picture a future without calculating exits first. That thought was the beginning of peace. In the weeks that followed, women I had never met started appearing in Miles's files. Names attached to quiet settlements, sudden moves, unexplained resignations. I kept thinking about how many people live in silence because it seems safer than truth. One evening, I watched Lily carry her backpack to the mudroom and felt something settle in my chest. I couldn't let my story end with my survival alone. I began sketching ideas on a yellow notepad, small plans for a safe place with beds that didn't feel like traps, therapists who believed first, lawyers who explained options without judgment. Dominic saw the pages and didn't dismiss them. He simply told Miles to start finding buildings and funding channels that could stand up to scrutiny. The thought of helping other mothers made me feel less haunted. As the city buzzed with rumors of collapsing alliances, I held Lily close and knew the real ending was a beginning. A home built on consent, a life chosen daily, and a harbor for anyone still trapped in the dark. Some nights I still woke with my heart sprinting, but now I had anchors. Lily's small hand, the soft light in the hall, Dominic sitting nearby until I nodded that touch was welcome. I started to believe love could be patient, even in a world built on force. And when I imagined Harbor House opening its doors, I pictured women exhaling for the first time. That was the future I chose. Months later, morning light spills across the kitchen tiles, and I realize I am not bracing for impact anymore. Lily sits at the island, letting me braid her hair, and she talks so loudly the house doesn't hush her. Her lunchbox waits by the door, scuffed and loved, and that ordinary little box still feels like a miracle. The cameras are still there, the gates still lock, but the air has softened, as if permission finally arrived. I go to therapy twice a week in a small office off the library, and I keep the details private, even from myself sometimes. What I can say is this: the nightmares visit less, and when they come, I wake sooner and return faster. Dominic never touches me in the dark without my signal. He sits close enough to anchor me, far enough to let me choose. I used to think control meant cruelty, but I have learned control can also mean patience. On good nights, I reach for his hand first, and he answers with stillness, waiting for my body to believe my own decision. When I say stop in my head, he stops in the room, like he can hear the boundary before it becomes fear. That is how trust grows for people like me, not in grand gestures, but in 100 small moments where nothing bad happens. In the afternoons, Lily and I practice being normal, spelling words, messy art projects, silly dances that make Dominic pretend he isn't smiling. I watch her run down the hallway without looking over her shoulder, and I know safety is finally starting to feel real to her. That is why I build Harbor House Initiative, not as a fairy tale, but as a place where women and kids can breathe and be believed. It begins with paperwork, permits, background checks, and phone calls that make my stomach twist, because asking for help used to be dangerous. Dominic funds it quietly through clean fronts, and he lets me be the face, the voice, the one who decides what the doors will mean. On opening day, the building smells like fresh paint and donated blankets, and the first room we finish is the kids' corner with soft rugs. I set a nightlight shaped like a moon on the shelf, and I think about how one small glow can change a whole night. A mother arrives with tired eyes and a toddler on her hip, and I don't need her story to recognize the way she holds her breath. I lead her to a chair, offer water, and stay present, because the first gift I ever needed was someone who didn't rush me. Later, back at the mansion, Lily helps me tape a drawing of our new logo to the fridge, and she names it what she calls our brave house. I laugh. Then I cry a little, then I laugh again, because healing looks exactly like that some days. Dominic stands in the doorway and waits until I nod that I want him closer, and when he comes, it is slow and respectful. We don't pretend the past didn't happen. We just refuse to let it drive the car anymore. I used to think love was a contract or a cage, but now I know love is protection offered freely and consent honored always. Strength isn't never breaking. Strength is rebuilding, slowly, with support that does not demand your silence as payment. If you are listening and you feel small, I want you to remember that choosing yourself can start with one breath and one honest sentence. Maybe your version of Harbor House is a friend you finally tell, a counselor you trust, a door you open. Maybe it is leaving, or staying and demanding respect, or simply admitting you deserve help without earning it. I learned that silence protects the wrong people, and truth, spoken carefully, can build an army of decent choices. I also learned that dangerous men can choose gentleness, but only when they believe a woman is not property. Dominic didn't rescue me like a fairy tale. He stood beside me while I picked my own life back up. Now, when Lily asks why I lock the door at night, I tell her it's because we deserve peace, not because we are afraid. The scars on my skin are fading, but the bigger change is inside. My voice stays in the room even when it shakes. I don't know what my father tells himself now, and I don't need to know, because his story isn't mine anymore. If this story gave you hope, please like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and comment what healing means to you. I'll be reading, and I'll be cheering for you from here today.